Uh-oh. Oh, snap. We live and in the building. We are live and in the building, man. We're just gonna go ahead and jump right into this here really quickly. Um, Prior to this, I just gotta check the channel, man. Make sure we're live. We are. Uh-oh. Yeah. It's a party. It's a party. It's a party. Yeah. Man, this is lit, man. This is lit. Yo, what's happening? Okay, I can see the comments in here. I'm moving through StreamYard really quickly, man. So, man, no, this is gonna be a fun time. All right, man. The question that I'm raising, all right, the question I'm raising, why are you ready for a relationship, man? And we're dealing with singleness, man. Listen, it is very, very eye-catching and eye-opening to me, rather, how interesting singleness is, how it's perceived, how it's viewed, how people go about it. And there's a lot of people that are just jumping into relationships and not really too sure what to do, how to navigate it, or whether or not they're even really ready for the relationship outside of being told you should, outside of being told, hey, this is what you need, this is what you should want, this is what everybody else is on, so what you want. And we're just here to digest that a little bit. And I want to start off by giving y'all some statistics, okay? Because this I think is going to be really good to kind of set the train wreck for our conversation, train ride for our conversation in this quick stream, man. So 63% of men today are reported to be single compared to the 34% of women. Okay. Man, I wish I could, I have a way of pulling it up. Let me see if I can get it together. Present. Aha. See, I'm gonna get it together, y'all. I'm gonna get it together. I'm gonna get it together. So I'm gonna cool. So this is up. So I'm gonna be referring back to this a little bit. Um on the stream. You might not be able to see it too closely. My guy, what's happening, Mobbin? What's good? Yes, sir. So look, 63% of men are single today compared to 34% of women. All right. And this actually points to a lot of things. Okay. So if you find yourself single, first and foremost, you aren't alone, especially if you're a man. All right. You're not alone. 63%. I mean, even though I wasn't maybe tallied in that, I mean, I'm included in that same demographic, right? 63% of men are single. And there's so many reasons why singleness is so prevalent in today's culture. Okay. There's so many reasons. We can talk about different types of wants, desires, three main reasons, which we'll get to. But here is the biggest thing that I want you to kind of grasp as we're catching this. All right, just according to the statistics here. I'm gonna go to Forbes. Okay, so Forbes is a pretty good reliability here. And roughly, again, 6 out of 10 young men under the age of 30 are single. Okay. And many are not interested in the form of romance. So not only is there singleness, so many people are single, but 57% aren't even interested. Okay. And then you have some 7% who are looking for casual dates only. Okay. 22% are looking for casual or committed, whereas 13 are only looking for committed relationship. Okay. So this is compared to 2019. So obviously before the pandemic, there's a lot of before and after, right? But a number of single Americans looking for a relationship dropped from 49% to 42% between 2019 and 2022. Okay. Dropped from 60 to 50% among single men, 38 to 35% among single women. So not only was there a difference between before and after the pandemic, but there was also a drop off. Okay. So what's the blame? Right? What's the blame? I love what you raised there, Jacoby, right? What's the deal? What's the reason behind so much singleness? Well, there's actually a plethora. All right. And for men, right, it seems as if there's a greater rate and increase statistically of men who are indulged and comfortable with things like pornography, video gaming, of course, right? And then basically, in a lot of ways, getting needs met, statistically, getting needs met without going out. Okay. So you're at the crib, man, you got the games, you got chilling with the boys, you got the food, you don't even have to step out nowhere. You got DoorDash, right? You got all this other kind of stuff. So you just have access to everything via technology and via DoorDash, all that good stuff. So you really don't got to go nowhere. There's no pressure for a lot of men to go anywhere and to go do anything. All of it can literally be brought to them via their cell phones, right? And so there's a lot of people that are glued to this, and it has to do with just a lot of ease of access. Don't have to earn nothing, don't have to go nothing. It's just all there, right? And as a result of these different types of how do I say this? These different types of descriptions, I should say, right? For men being comfortable in their in singleness and feeling like they don't got to really connect with anybody, women are possible. Okay, so this is a potential, right? Due to the big drop off of the percentage, women again 34% single. This is not suggesting that all women are doing this. This is in no way, shape, or form even suggesting that all men are doing this, right? Of course, this is just a part of the demographic, but women are statistically possible to date each other. Okay, actually, it is said about a fifth of the LGBT population is about is women, and um I don't know if I'm necessarily got clearance to say is it queer, right? I mean, that's the description of the LGBT, right? And so as a result, the women are statistically possible to either date each other, okay? And this is an interesting description too. Become more choosy or not looking to marry down. Okay. And then in this description, the marrying down is compared with degrees, right? Level of degrees, right? Women may not want to look to marry somebody who doesn't kind of have their same level of education successes, those kinds of things. Okay, listen, if you're feeling depressed and sad hearing all this, just we got some good stuff that's going to clear all of this up before we get to the end of this. But this is just what the statistics read to us. Okay. And a lot women now more often want men who are emotionally available and empathetic. Okay. So there seems to be a disconnect between men and women in that realm where there doesn't seem to be a lot of men available emotionally, empathetically, or just have any specific direction, vision, steps ahead for their life, right? So because we have ease of access to everything, I don't got to go anywhere to do anything. It's all coming to the crib. I can get on the game. The sex hookup, all that good stuff, man. I got the pornography. I got all this other kind of stuff. There's just no seemingly motivation for a lot of men to step out here and be like, shoot, yeah, I'm finna go grab me a honey dip, or I'm finna go out here, step out here and date, right? You kind of might hear this a lot in red pill communities as well. Okay, red pill honestly talks about a lot of this stuff too, in the sense of, hey, um, men don't have to find themselves putting themselves out in front street to get what they want. They all can just come and get it in different varieties, different forms, temporarily, in short form order. Okay, so these are really interesting other statistics that I want to share with you, because along with the singleness is also the isolation. Okay. Isolation and perception. Okay. So this is kind of where we're going to veer off a little bit, not veer off, but transition from looking at the isolation statistics specifically for men to the perception due to a study that we did some research on. So isolation has grown since the pandemic as well. Okay. So along with singleness does also come isolation. And 15% of men report having no close friendships. Zero. None. Nada. Right? Whereas 27% of men report having 6 or more close friends. Okay, so I'm just labeling out all of these statistics here because all of this has to deal with why you want even a relationship in the first place, right? Again, as we kind of introed into this, you have so many familiar pressures, friendly pressures, social media pressures, standards, all these different expectations that are laid out in front of you, right? Again, back to the phone. Not only do we just have the pornography and the video gaming and all this other kind of stuff, bro, social media, right? 24/7. TikTok, you got 60 seconds to make me smile, make me laugh, make me giggle, all that kind of stuff, right? Like this is what we're glued to, right? We're glued to it. We're glued to the social media trends. We're glued to all these things that we see. And so we feel as if a relationship is the right step to take for where we are and what we're doing, all because everybody else is doing it. All because everybody else in our circles are getting married, starting their families, doing all these other kind of things. And here we are, right? We're just kind of in our own lane, in our own circle, don't know what to do with ourselves. So we're trying to find ourselves filling those gaps by doing something either similar to it or something that we think is just going to bring us some ultimate satisfaction in the end to kind of replace that feeling of missing out, fear of missing out. Okay? So there's isolation, there's this great seemingly statistical problem of singleness. But the question is it really a problem? Is singleness really a problem? Is it as much of a problem as maybe statistics would share for us to make it out to be? So if it's not the problem, if being single in and of itself isn't the problem, then what is the problem? Okay. So we brought up the pandemic and now we're talking about perception. So if pandemic could be part of the problem, what else could it be? Let's look at perception. Okay. So I'm actually going to pull up this statistic here for you guys to see. Voluntary and involuntary singlehood. All right. This is what we're going to look at here. I don't think you guys can see it in this frame, so I'm going to change the frame here for you guys to catch it. Ooh, that's nasty. Yep. Don't worry, I'm getting it together. Aha. So I'm gonna minimize myself here. All right. So, yep, share this tab instead. So there's a lot of words here. I'm gonna find it and highlight it for a second because there is a lot that was said in this study that I just want you guys to catch. All right. And they kind of covered a different variety of processes. But perception was one of the bigger things that has either brought about a sense of romantic loneliness or a fear of loneliness among people who are single. And this actual study was presented in the specifics through the notes here that I took of 151 participants, right? So 86 females, 65 males from Poland, ages 20 to 26. All right. And so they got their hypothesis, they got all that figured out. So this is the conclusion that this study ultimately comes to regarding how they're feeling in their singleness, voluntary versus involuntary, right? So I want to be single and I can't stand this season. I can't stand this singleness. And then what were the effects of those perceptions? And so let's look at some of these results here. Results indicated that voluntary and involuntarily single individuals did not differ in regard to their age, okay, place of residence, education level, the duration of remaining single. Okay, both groups also did not differ in regard to their use of psychological psychiatric help in the past. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be too much of a difference as to, well, is it voluntarily because of men or women? There's no difference in that realm. It's all the same. But here's where it gets interesting. Okay, I'm going to try and scroll here without kind of using the notes at least. So of course, they had their hypothesis, those kinds of things. The objective of the present study, let's get the objective out the way, was to investigate whether voluntary singlehood and involuntary singlehood are related to romantic loneliness, positive mental health, and mental illness in a group of single Polish young adults. In addition, special attention was paid to gender differences in regard to domain of romantic loneliness, positive mental health, and mental health illness. Okay, so looking at this difference, is there a greater increase of romantic loneliness if one is voluntarily or involuntarily single? What does that look like? Okay. So hopefully I can find this too. Because there was a lot to read, y'all. I ain't gonna lie to you. There was a lot to read. I can honestly just go to the notes too. That can work as well. So, in the current study, two open research questions were formulated with respect to gender differences in the domain of positive and mental health illness, romantic loneliness, the possibility of interaction between voluntary and involuntary singlehood and gender. The performed analysis demonstrated no difference in the level of positive mental health or mental health illness, and no interactional effect of voluntary and involuntarily singlehood and gender. Okay, again, so there's no difference in lack of mental health or mental health illness, but the biggest difference in all of this was the loneliness. In the perception of singlehood, those who seem to view singlehood as involuntary, according to this same study, reveals to us that they would feel a little bit more romantically lonely compared to those who looked at their singleness as voluntary. Okay, this is something I want to do. This is a place I want to be. So because that's the perception that I have on the singleness, it's a positive thing. It's something that's actually going to benefit me. It's going to help me. Not only do I think differently about my singleness, but I'm actually able to enjoy it compared to the involuntary singlehood that would say, bro, I don't even want to be here. This is terrible. And this is not how I envision my life going. And so I'm not even able to be present and enjoy this to any extent possible. Okay. So here's a couple actual reasons that they bring about that has people remaining single in this same study. Okay. Not meeting the right person, not meeting potential partners, marriage is not a priority in life, importance of other things in life, choice of being single, difficulties in establishing relationships, fear that the relationship will not work, fear of commitment, and belief that all good partners are already taken. Attributes regarding reasons for being unmarried. Okay. Of course, those who are single are those who are not married, according to this statistic. Those who are also not moving in cohabitation. They're not currently committed to anybody. Those people are all kind of included in this realm of singleness. Okay. So this is the last thing I'm going to pull up from here regarding the romantic loneliness. All right. Loneliness is considered to be a common life experience. Okay. According to this statistic or this research, of course. Um, uh, let's see here. To be precise, the authors found that in the case of depressive symptoms, 75% of the total effect was mediated through loneliness, whereas in the case of somatic symptoms, just over 40% of the total effect was mediated through loneliness. In a more recent study, okay, individuals with the worst mental health and well-being were 3 to 5 times more likely to report occasional loneliness and 3 to 6 times more likely to report frequent loneliness. Okay, so what does this have to do with romantic loneliness? Okay, so Wes, I hope I'm saying his name right, was the first to describe loneliness as a multidimensional experience and propose a distinction between social loneliness as a result of inadequate access to a network of peers, coworkers, neighbors, or friends, and emotional loneliness resulting from a lack of close or intimate relationships that are characteristic of ties with a romantic partner, parent, or child. Emotional loneliness is primarily related to the absence of a partner. Okay, he's giving us the definitions there. In turn, social loneliness is related to a perceived deficiency in social networks or a lack of social relations or social activities. Keyword perceived. Furthermore, on the basis of Wyeth's distinction between the experience of social isolation and emotional isolation, Di Tommaso and Spinner noted that emotional loneliness appeared to be compromised of two domains, that is family emotional loneliness and romantic emotional loneliness. Okay, so there's not just loneliness in general, it's types of loneliness and where it's coming from. Okay, so there's emotional and then there's romantic. Okay, romantic is, man, I'm feeling lack of close intimacy with somebody else, and then there's emotional, right? Where I'm losing. Well, of course they kind of tie all that together. It looks like in the beginning, but the romantic is more so in the dating realm, right? So it's all tied together in difference rather from the social relation. Okay, from the social loneliness. So social loneliness is social networking, emotional and romantic, same difference, right? I'm feeling lack of intimacy with somebody else. So look at what this says. The lack of romantic partners or romantic or intimate relationships may be an important perceived casual factor for one's present feelings of loneliness. For example, married individuals and individuals living with a significant other reported less romantic loneliness than those who were not in such relationships. Okay, Di Tommaso and Spinner revealed, again, 1993, revealed that being involved in a romantic relationship was significantly related to lower levels of romantic loneliness, but was only weakly linked to family and social loneliness. Divorce or widowhood were found to be associated with an increased risk of feeling lonely, whereas not living alone and having more social support turned out to lower the risk of being lonely. Furthermore, several studies conducted in Poland also provided consistent results demonstrating that single young adults report greater romantic loneliness than young adults in non-marital relationships. Okay. So romantic loneliness seems to be at a higher rate. Okay. Due to your perception of the singleness, due to the perception of loneliness. Okay. And the type of loneliness you're feeling, that is what seems to have a correlation to not only how you view your singleness, but of course, you turning out to be lonely. So, what's the point in me sharing any of this? Okay. All of this perception is important, right? So the reason why you may feel like your singleness is awful or your singleness is dreadful, or your singleness is not the move, right? And furthermore, causing you to jump into relationships with other people romantically is possibly because of your perception of loneliness, your perception of singleness, right? Because if you paid attention, as we just revealed in this very same study, people who may not have been even in romantic ties, but had social support didn't necessarily feel too lonely. Actually, it was a lower percentage. So I think sometimes in some cases in this culture, we are looking for romantic relationships to solve the lonely problem, to solve the problem of feeling alone, right? But then we get in the relationship and we still feel alone. Well, how is that even possible, right? Well, one, because the loneliness didn't have to do with us not being in a romantic relationship. The loneliness had one to do with the perception of how we feel about ourselves and our singleness, and also has to deal with a lack of finding support and community around us where we can relate, we can build, right? Which is why it's so important. Again, one of the biggest encouragements I give to people is getting in a community and finding community, because that is very, very healthy in a lot of ways, right? But what we do is we're like, nah, I think it's time for me to get into a relationship. And we kind of psych ourselves into that. But really, it's trying to solve a loneliness problem. It's not really to actually bring about this relationship in purpose, in truth, right? It's not really considering a lot of different things that would make the relationship make sense and actually help us move in purpose, right? So, do you feel you're ready for a relationship because you're lonely? Right? Do you feel that you're ready for a relationship because you're just tired of doing things on your own? And don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that wanting one because you want to be with somebody eventually is a bad thing, right? It's a beautiful thing. We just have to be mindful of the reasons for why we feel we're ready for a relationship. Okay. And so there's some differences in that. And then the totality of that study, y'all, again, regardless, I'll share this because it's in my notes. Um, adds the complexity of singlehood. And it's contrary to stereotypes, right? So there's typical stereotypes for singleness, right? People think that, oh, singleness, single people are lost and miserable and unhappy. And statistically, that isn't completely true. But we do understand also at the same rate statistically that there are people who are not satisfied, or the reasons for them not being, or the reasons for them being single, it's actually not even optimal for that individual or where they're trying to go and what they're trying to make out of their lives. Right. And so the purpose here isn't to necessarily force you to feel, man, okay, I'm single, so that must mean something's wrong. That doesn't mean always that something is wrong. Rather, we're trying to figure out, okay, what should we move towards relationships? But furthermore, how am I even able to even enjoy and maximize my singleness where I am without feeling the absolute need to get into a romantic relationship in order to feel this sense of satisfaction in my life? Relationships bring a lot of great things, joy to your life. Yes, it can add the right relationships add value to your life, 1000%. But it doesn't necessarily mean that a romantic relationship is necessary to get to that place. But the reason why we think it is because of what? Our perception. Okay. So I love what Mobin said, right? I love what you said. Seems like perception affects mindset, which affects how you operate in that season. 1000%. That's exactly what this study reveals, right? Upon others. Okay. And of course, this is just from Poland and all those kinds of things, but it's still an applicable study to keep in mind. So I want to take to you three more things, and then we're kind of going to shift from this to kind of see, well, what do we get from this entire conversation to deal with the question of why you're ready for a relationship. And I want y'all to type, if anybody is in here, of course, if you're watching a replay, comment below. Like, if you really do genuinely believe, of course, you're in your singleness season, or maybe you're already in a relationship, what led you to believe that you were ready for the relationship you're in or a relationship you're desiring to be in? What things are leading you to feel that way? I think it's very important to ask these questions and consider them prior to getting into a relationship, right? Especially from the basis of what we just discussed. So here's another statistic I want to bring up to y'all, man. Psychology Today, okay, gives us three main reasons why people stay single. Okay. So this is actually going to help us a lot too, in terms of perception, in terms of why people are refraining from relationships, which gives us more clarity, again, not just on the perception of singleness and dating and marriage and relationships in general. But also, it's really going to have a huge impact on the pillars that we're going to offer in the end. It's going to help us be able to navigate and maximize our singleness to be in a position to be prepared for a future relationship because we're doing the right work that's going to allow us to maximize it. Right. So, check this out. 3 reasons people stay single. Okay. This, I think, is going to be the last stat and sheet of statistics that I give you. All right. So there's 3 reasons. Okay. Freedom of choice, right? And there's a lot of description there. Constraints and difficulties with relationships. Okay. So we're just going to give and read off a few of these. And let's see if this is something that maybe you can relate to. Okay. In freedom of choice, maybe somebody you know or you yourself remain single to be free to flirt with whoever you want. Sound relatable? Maybe it's not that, so that I can have many casual relationships. You get to not just one, I don't got to be tied down, but I can go to many. I can go to multiple. I can do it however I want. Is that something that sounds like it? To have a freer sexual life. Maybe it's to have more choices. How many times have you heard that? Have you said that? Right? So that I can go out more often. Right? Oh, you're not the family type. Right? Kind of awkward, kind of weird, but okay. I have not accumulated enough experiences to commit to a relationship. Right? A question I would ask is, what experiences are you looking to have prior to having a relationship? What experience do you think you need to have prior to having a relationship? That could be another question to ask in order to not get bored. Right? So you refrain from a relationship because you think that by getting into a relationship, you'll get bored. Do you see how all of this has a lot to do with perception, has a lot to do with how you perceive, how you look, how you see and view relationships, which actually in turn affects how you view the world? So, like, relationships aren't just something that we just jump into, right? Like, how we navigate them, how we move through them, right? There could be a lot of barriers that are keeping you from even maximizing the singleness you may be in, and maybe keeping you from actually being prepared the best way possible to enter into a relationship, all because of your perception. Right? You're perceiving that by getting into this relationship you're going to be bored. Can you explain how you're going to be bored? What makes a relationship boring? Right? Those are important thoughts to consider. Right? Okay, so you feel that you can go out more often. What makes you feel that by getting into a relationship you'll go out less? Right? Of course, we can go off of stereotypes. We can go off of all of those, right? But how much more going out and much more, what all activities are you looking to get into that you feel you couldn't get into by having a significant other? Again, this isn't to force you to get into that space, but these are questions to consider, right? A lot of these think of, you feel free to flirt, have more choices, freer sexual life. It seems like there's this desire, there's this drive to have more, which also leads to this idea that there's no way, shape, or formality of satisfaction. There's no way in which you feel that one is enough and could ever be enough, right? So there's a lack of satisfaction somewhere. So again, we're talking about perception, we're talking about worldview, we're talking about things that satisfy you internally, right? So there's a lack and misguidance in those areas in order not to get bored. That was probably one of the most mind-boggling ones to me, right? So as not to feel under pressure. Very interesting. So that I have more time to spend with my friends. Okay. Maybe that comes from specific spaces too. Have you ever considered that maybe you view your singleness the way you do, whether it's to have more or to be in spaces of isolation because of your familial background, because of what you saw as you grew up? Maybe you saw how your parents treated one another and you told yourself you never wanted that. Maybe you saw close friends around you who carried relationships that didn't really pan out too well. And you remember being there for those friends who were broken and you were like, nah, I don't want none of that. Maybe you've been in those spaces. Is that maybe what's causing the worldview and the perception that you carry on the relationships? Maybe even to the point of you not even maximizing your singleness, right? And we're going to talk about how you can do that towards the end of this talk, but just some things to consider. And there's so many more differences and descriptions as to why, regarding freedom of choice. You don't want to lose your freedom. What freedoms do you feel you would lose? And is that even really true freedom? We've talked about that a lot on this channel, right? That's another talk for another day, right? So all these different descriptions. Now let's move to constraints. Maybe it's not a freedom of choice you feel. Maybe it's constraints, right? You feel, well, maybe you feel a relationship that doesn't make sense for you, or being prepared for one, or doing anything is because you can't have children. You're grieving, right? Very serious things. Okay. Not doing very well in sexual domain, right? You sometimes face sexual difficulties. Your relationship may not be socially acceptable. Okay. So there's a little bit of people pleasing in some of it, right? I don't want them to look at me a certain way. I don't want to be viewed a certain way, right? So that also has a little bit of internal things to deal with. Again, perception, perceiving. We've seen that word a lot in this talk, and we're gonna find out why. I want to devote you want to devote your attention to your children if you have some prior to being out of a marriage, okay? Or maybe you were divorced, those kinds of situations, right? Serious health issues, disability, a lot of like these, and these are some serious concerns on for some people. So maybe it's not constraints. Maybe you feel like, man, I can't because of this. Maybe it's like, nah, I don't want to, because if I do, I lose instead of gain, right? I lose freedoms. What about difficulties in relationships? Okay. And this is going to be the last one that we cover. What about difficulties in relationships? You recently broke up, right? That's all real. Afraid of being disappointed. You're afraid. You're afraid. You're afraid. You can't trust. You can't, right? There's a lot of I'm afraid statements. I can't statements, right? A lot of limiting beliefs, right? So there's potentially a lot of limiting beliefs in front of you that are keeping you from seeing relationships in the best light, in the right light, and in a light that's beneficial to you and where you're going. And vice versa for your singleness. Okay. Because again, you don't have to endure and engage in a relationship in order for life to be purposeful, romantic, that is. Right. And I'm going to tell you why again in the end when we come to these pillars, because this is all going to make sense, y'all. This is all going to make sense. But your perception matters. Your perception on your singleness matters, whether you're going to enjoy it, whether it's something that you're going to benefit from, whether it's something that you're going to grow in, and whether it's something you're going to see as an opportunity to be prepared for future relationships that you carry, a romantic relationship that you may desire, that you may want to build, right? There's a lot of rushing happening in our culture today. I mean, you don't even get on social media anymore without, again, swiping left, swiping right, swiping up, swiping down, 60 seconds here, 30 seconds there. It's programming. We're being programmed so much to rush into things, to jump into things just because somebody else did it and it looked good and it looked promising. And in reality, man, we don't take a second to take a step back and think on the right things to be able to be in the best positions possible. Right? Maybe you're somebody who thinks who thinks this way. Love scares you. Change scares you, right? Having to make room for somebody else's change and growth, feeling like you can't really feel or deal much with your own. So how in the world am I going to handle somebody else's? I'm good, right? You have extreme difficulty in feeling like you don't have enough time to devote to a relationship. You're not willing to compromise. You don't trust easily. You're afraid. You're afraid. You're afraid. Stress and anxiety, all these different things, right? So this is interesting. This is interesting. I love the question you asked, Jacoby. I love it. I love it. So let's dive into it, right? So I bring up all these statistics. I might have bored you to death. It's cool. But I bring up all these statistics for this very reason. We understand your perception matters. We understand how you view your singleness, how you view relationships affect how it really come from a place of your worldview, has a lot to deal with your programming, has a lot to deal with how you see the world in every way possible. So how in the world does this make sense for our question of why you're ready? Why are you ready for a relationship? Because maybe you thought you were ready for a relationship due to your singleness and due to your loneliness, rather. You thought you were ready for a relationship. Man, shoot, everybody else is getting around me and getting together. So it only makes sense. Maybe you thought you were ready for a relationship because you had the car, because you had the house, because you had the money, you had the job, right? Because you had all these different things lined up and stacked up. Shoot, I got to be ready now. I got all that stuff in hand, right? But what does it really look like to be prepared for a relationship to pursue and to be able to give our intentional attitude and motioning to in order to make the most of it? What is it? What does it take? Well, here are three things, three pillars that I want to give you that is going to help shift your perception on singleness, on relationships, and is going to in turn create better relationships for your life. You ready? I want you to write this down. In your singleness, prior to you saying, I am ready for a relationship, I am ready for that. I have the capacity for that before I can even get there. And the reasons why you feel you can't get there and the limiting beliefs that are clouding your mind that are feeling like they're keeping you from getting there. These three things. You need a relationship with your creator. You need a relationship with your calling, and you need a relationship with capacity. Boom. So the question on how, if it's mainly about your perception that you're struggling in your singleness, how in the world am I going to be able to shift my thinking to then not only maybe appreciate my singleness, but then be able to advance in my singleness, to be able to max out my singleness, to enjoy it, and furthermore, be prepared in the process of enjoying it for a relationship? Those three things: having a relationship with your creator, calling, and capacity. How does that make sense? Well, remember I told you about the loneliness. Remember I told you about the isolation. Remember all these things that I brought up in the beginning. All of these things in some way, shape, or form regarding the men and feeling like they have all their needs met without having to go out, with all these people who are feeling like there is a distance and there's a gap between men and women and what women need and what men can't seem to grant in this space, in this dating space. It all has to deal with a lack somewhere of these three relationships in their life that, if it's cultivated, would provide you the capacity to be able to say, I'm ready to adventure into a relationship. Let's give a brief breakdown, okay? Because there's so much nuance to it. So I'm going to give a brief breakdown. If you want to, you have to have these three, right? Because in your singleness, you're not alone. That's what's so crazy. I think we mistake singleness for being alone and not being around people. Like, oh my God, it feels so dreadful. I just feel so alone in this world. And I think it's hard to rest in places of loneliness and feeling alone, isolated. It's hard to rest there. I'm not saying it's hard or impossible to get there. It's just hard to rest there when you have relationships with these things, right? Especially the first one, relationship with your creator. Because in a relationship with your creator, you're given foundation, you're given value, you're given foundation, value, understanding, right? In your relationship with your creator, this is how you're able to make room to understand who you are. Okay? To not only understand who you are, but then you're also, by way of understanding who you are, you're also gaining understanding of the next relationship you're calling. All these things are being cultivated. All these things are relationships that we're always cultivating and we're always growing, right? So I need a relationship with God. I need a relationship with my calling. What is my assignment in my life? What am I even supposed to be doing in this life? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to move? Right? Because here's the thing, we get in relationships often without without having an awareness and an understanding of what we're called to do and what we're assigned to do in this life, right? If we really believe and we're choosing to acknowledge that we're put on this life for a reason, we're put on this earth for a reason. We're born, we live, and we die for a reason. We experience those phases of life. Then there has to be something greater to life that's bigger than me, that I am assigned to, no matter how small or great. I don't mean bigger than you in terms of platforms and all those kinds of things, but it's bigger than me. And so it brings about this sense of purpose in my life. I have a reason to wake up every day and enjoy each day that it comes. Well, what is that? How do we get there? What are the steps to get there? Back to number one. because you can't have the relationship with your calling without a relationship with the creator, because the creator is the one who grants you the assignment and calling you have on your life. So I need those two. And then I also need a relationship with capacity. Do I have room and access to fully give my time and attention to this person? Do I have full access and understanding of where this person is? Do I have the capacity to be flexible, vulnerable, and compromise? Right. And here's the big kicker, because it gets really nuanced, which is why we're not even going to touch the surface. But I just want you to get your mind on this and keep coming back, because we're going to keep talking about these things. When we think of the capacity, it's not just am I available and what time am I available and how much time do I have available. When you think of capacity as well, this again has to deal with your worldview, has to deal with how you see the world, how you see people, how you view relationships, right? Your faith, your foundation, your beliefs. That's what really is going to shape how you see things. Because the reason why you don't feel you aren't ready, or you can't be ready, or you're incapable of having a relationship is because you have not expanded the capacity in your life, in your brain, in your thinking, in your paradigm to overcome the limiting beliefs that stand in front of you, because you are so used to things operating how you've seen it and not how it should be. Right. So there's a lot of programming that's happened there. It's a lot of programming. So we have to work backwards. So that means in order to create the capacity to learn to how to be vulnerable with others, not with everybody, but to be vulnerable and create vulnerable spaces, honest and transparent spaces, in order to view love as something that could be potentially scary and worth it, to look at change as something that's positive and a challenge. In order to view that in that way, it takes us viewing and having the right perception in order to make the right adjustments. So I'm telling you that it is possible that you may not be as ready as you think you are for a relationship because of your perception, because of a potential lack of purpose somewhere, and because of these three pillars that maybe you have not checked off yet. And it is until you have an awareness and understanding and a positioning in these three relationships prior to a romantic relationship, the romantic relationship doesn't necessarily make too much sense. It can't make too much sense. It fails to have a point of reference and reason behind it. And it doesn't really have a chance to be cultivated in high levels. It doesn't. It doesn't have a chance of really being all you hope it can be and all you believe it can be. And I believe if you really desire a relationship, you can get one. You can have one. It's not just about having a relationship, though. It's about having the right relationship. And it starts by building on these pillars of relationships: relationship with your creator, calling, and capacity. And I believe that if you do these three things and if you cultivate these three relationships, your not only chances and opportunities at relationships is far greater, but your opportunity to lead, pour in, bring value to that relationship, and furthermore have a relationship that's committed to the long haul as something that's available for you. And if you are someone who does not desire a relationship, your singleness is just okay. It's amazing. That's awesome. And now with these three relationships, okay, of course, because I continuously use the word relationships because that's what they are. You're continuously cultivating them. There's never not a time where you're not cultivating those and it's not bringing impact and benefit to your life. And you are never not without relationship. You and I are never without relationship. Single, dating, married, divorced, widowed, parent, son, daughter. You and I are not without relationship. No matter how distant we are from people or no matter how close we are to others. But the only way we're going to be able to see that is by having a shift of perspective and unlocking that key that is causing those limiting beliefs to then be able for you to see the world in a different way, in a more impactful way that's actually going to produce impactful results for you and for the relationships you desire to have, whether they're romantic or not. And this is a space where you're able to maximize your singleness with those three. So that's it. That's the TED Talk. I'm gonna take questions. I see a few. I see one in there. Um, I see one in there, and then I'm gonna take questions, man. And I want y'all to come back. I want y'all to come back. I want y'all to share what y'all got from this. I want y'all to comment below what you got from this. Definitely come back because we got some more stuff to talk about regarding all of this. To play devil's advocate here, just in case we tell unbelievers this, what if I believe we are placed here for an arbitrary reason? What if I believe I don't have a purpose? Yeah, I think there's a lot that could potentially be wrong with that, because if you don't believe that you have a purpose, then I don't believe you can tell me why a relationship you desire to have uh carries purpose. I'm not too sure if you could tell me that. If you don't believe you as yourself as an individual has purpose, it is hard to come up with a point of reference as to why a relationship makes sense. Think about all the reasons why people say they want a relationship. I don't want to die lonely. I don't want to die alone. I don't want to do all those things. But is that really the purpose of a relationship and meaningful connection with somebody, so you don't die alone? And why is it that in today's culture we are so afraid of being on our own? What's that about? If you ask me, I think it's a perception problem. It's not that you're single that's the problem. It's not that you don't have a relationship. That's not the problem. The problem is actually a greater, deeper level that's intrinsic. It's internal, not external. Now, there could be external factors that could be playing a role in that, but ultimately it's an internal problem. And we have to be willing to deal with that. So wait, why don't I why do I feel this impulsive need to have a romantic relationship or to be in a relationship? Why have I not like slowed down to consider like why I don't enjoy being by myself in my own company? Why is it that I continuously tell people I hate my singleness and I just wish somebody would come scoop me up off my feet? Why do I? Right? So I think that very word, and that's the last thing I might say on this, Jacoby, the very word purpose, man, by definition is the reason why something exists. So if you don't believe you have purpose, then you are also telling me that you don't believe you have a reason for existing. But your very existence contradicts that statement, because if you didn't have a reason for existing, I don't know if it's hard to say that you would be existing and you would be in existence logically. Logically. So then we have to ask ourselves, if I don't believe I have a purpose, how can I then expect a relationship or connection that I build with somebody else to have a purpose if I'm not bringing any to it? If I'm not placing any into it? And it's weird and it's really interesting because the very people who would suggest this, right? I'm thinking more of like maybe atheists might suggest some things, or people who just don't believe in the existence of God. There are many people who would take that position. And I would say that although they're going to give me reasons and reasons and upon reasons, right? So even though they're going to give me reasons upon reasons as to why the relationship, marriage, friendship, workship, all those kinds of things. I said workship, but really like, companionship, all those kinds of things. Like, cool. You're going to give me the reasons, but you don't have a point of reference. So yes, you're going to tell me because they helped you do this and they helped you through this tough time and they helped you through that. Absolutely. I like, what's crazy is I'm not even arguing against you about that. You just have to explain to me the point of reference for that, because if there's no reason for existence on this earth, if there's no reason, then you can't really contemplate or fathom a reason for a relationship or even that relationship. Because according to your worldview, which is why we mentioned worldview earlier on in this little, lecture, however you want to describe it, the reason why we brought that up is because your worldview matters. Your worldview matters. And if you have that worldview, it's not to say that you're incapable of having a relationship. I just think from that worldview, using that logic, there's no point in having a relationship because you can't explain to me the love you're having for that person or those friends, those relationships. You can't explain to me why that relationship makes sense from a point of reference. From a point of reference. And so there's no ground. You're kind of just doing it to do it based on that logic and reasoning. And I think anytime we connect with somebody on the basis of just doing it to do it, and of course this kind of goes more into the romantic space, I think we have to pull back. We have to be like, man, why do I even want this? Why do I feel I'm ready? What gives me the indication that I'm ready? And there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more to dive into, but we have to be willing to pull back and ask ourselves those questions prior to walking into a relationship. Because a romantic relationship of any kind requires us to be present in singleness and to be willing to submit to that season and maximize that. You don't really get a great opportunity to enjoy the heights and directions of relationships you create romantically if you refuse to be willing to do work in your singleness to max it out by journeying through these three pillars. Because without journeying through these three pillars, that relationship you're going to try and do it there instead of your singleness, and doing it there is where a lot of things can go wrong, because there is where you're supposed to be prepared for that journey. I'm not saying you have to have it all. No one in the history, I don't think, I've ever done, and I'm speaking just in my own opinion. I don't think anybody would ever really truly tell you I was fully prepared for a relationship. No, no one's fully prepared. Okay. You can't look so far down the road and be like, yeah, I was prepared for that. I was prepared for that. Prepared for that. No, no, you're going to learn along the way, and you're learning to make room for another person as you're journeying. But I'm just saying these three pillars, the relationship with the creator, calling, and capacity, is what gives you the great indication of whether or not you're prepared for the journey of a relationship. I'm not saying that you're prepared to do everything in that relationship and you're ready for everything that comes. No, are you prepared for the journey of it? And I just don't believe that you can fully be prepared for that journey unless you look at these three pillars. That's it. That's all I got. So we'll go into the nuances, man. We'll go into the nuances. If you guys want more, definitely get at your boy. Okay. Singlescoachgrape at gmail.com is where you can find me. You can send an email and get more on this. Okay. You want more? You caught the stream, you caught the replay. Yo, tell me a little bit more about this. I really want some help, some coaching, some insight. Your boy's got your back. All right. Send me an email through that at singlescoachgrape at gmail.com. It'll be linked in the description along with everything else in this stream, and we'll get it cracking over there. All right. So we might make this a little bit more of a regular. All right. I'm still trying to figure out the right schedule. But man, expect me here again. Expect me here again next Friday. Expect me here again next Friday. We're going to turn this back up and turn it around and just dive in a little bit more, just a little bit more, just a little bit more into the nuances of singleness, of relationships, and the necessities of being prepared for such, as we're looking to, at the same time, maximize our singleness and enjoy it and not carry it around as a burden. And I hope you got a lot out of this talk. And I appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Definitely check out the recent video that I've uploaded on the channel, covering some reactions. I got another one popping up tomorrow. So I love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. And until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy, my friend. Peace.